Hello, hello. Tanya here from myslope.com with a new tool addition. So this is the A-line skirt tool. Very exciting update. There's a lot that you can do with it. As with all the other tools, you can customize and hack it all day. So let's just hop into it. As usual, we have our measurement profiles here where we can pre-populate the form. There's not too many measurements that need to be populated, so we have waist and hip. I did have a request to have pattern specs also be added as measurement profiles, so TBD on the list. We also have our ASTM size table, so we have Missy Curvy, Missy Straight, girls 2 to 20, and then you can pick your size. You have to pick the size table, pick your size, decide if you're going to be working in centimeters or inches, and then we hop into the meat and potatoes. So first option here is choose the skirt shape. For the back skirt panel, I'll walk you through what this looks like in a sec as we generate the patterns. So you can get a good idea. Waist measurement, pretty self-explanatory. Hip, self-explanatory. Right seam height. So this is going to be your side seam for the right side seam. So this is always going to be the one that's not on the fold. And then the left side seam height is going to be the seam on the fold. So there's gonna be no seam allowance there when you're going to be cutting on the fold for this. But if you want to hack it, you can, and just add seam allowance if you wanted to make a huge asymmetrical piece without cutting on the fold, because asymmetrical you wouldn't be able to cut on the fold. You can do that. You would just need to double your hip measurement and your waist measurement. We won't complicate it too much. Let's just stick to the basics for now. So let's say I wanted to do a truly asymmetrical style, and I'm going to just work on the front panel. So the seams are going to be uniform all the way through. So let's put a 30, sorry, am I in centimeters? I'm in centimeters. My Canadianness is showing. So we're going to go 30 centimeters and 30 centimeters for the right and left side. And then the flare is set to 50. So the flare is essentially how much the hem is going to deviate from that hip measurement. So if you really want the skirt to hug the hip asymmetrical style, you'll set it to 0. And the closest you go to 100, the more it's going to flare out, especially if you're working with you're creating like a figure skating dress or a lyrical costume. You might want a little bit more flare, but you're still going to have that asymmetrical look. It's not going to be full flare like a circle skirt, for example. So let's set it to 0 just to give a baseline, and then I'll walk you through the 50, 100, but you can really get granular here and set it to whatever you want. So seam allowance for the waist, though, that's going to be your seam allowance on the waist. Let's set that to 0.64. My hem, I'm going to set that to 1, and then my side seam 0.64. And the negative ease, I'm going to set this. This is just applying to the hip measurement, to the waist measurement, not the hip. So the hemline is always going to be no negative ease, otherwise it sticks way too close. This is when you're working with stretch. So yes, this is just going to apply to the waist measurement. Let's do a 10% for now. As always, we have our download full page. So this is our full page render, and then we have our tiled for printing. And I always recommend to open both so you can see what your pattern looks like if you're not using a projector or you're not using Adobe, just so that way everything looks okay versus printing everything out and then cutting and taping. Okay, so this is 27 for our right seam, 27 for our left seam. It's a pretty uniform skirt. You're going to cut on the fold, so nothing crazy. Let's say we're going to walk through scenarios now, because that's how I made these tools so we can customize and hack them without hacking them on the cutting table. So let's say we wanted to put a little bit more length in the back because, you know, the booty does make the skirt ride up a little bit. So let's add on 4 centimeters. Let's be really generous here. We will see that difference for the back panel. So let's say you wanted to use, let's close this. You wanted to use this as your front panel. So your side seams, your right seam will match together. I think I changed my measurements here. Okay, no, I didn't. So your right seams will match together, but then when you cut on the fold, your back piece will have that additional length and everything is true and everything will work together. If you really want to get dramatic, this is where the tail comes in. So that was the narrow tail. So let me just show you the narrow tail. This is going to be the full tail. It's going to be very minor. It's a very minor difference, but if we're really making like a high-low kind of look, so let's go really crazy. Let's go 45. So this is where, so that is full tail, and this is going to be narrow tail. So we can see this is where the difference comes in. So if you're making the thing that stands out to me the most is figure skating, also lyrical costume, because those costumes tend to be a bit more flowy. So that's where you might play around with the skirt shape a bit more for your back piece. So let's reel it in a little bit more. Let's put it back to, let's do a 30. Let's keep it uniform, and let me show you what a 50% flare looks like. And there are photos. I'll show you the photos in a sec of what the, I mean, you can't really tell too much here, but let's close these guys. Yeah, I mean, this isn't really showing you anything. You'd really have to see it on your cutting table, but maybe the 100% flare will make a difference. Yeah, we can see that the hemline does flare out a bit more. Another note, we have our measurement square here, so it's our 1 inch by 1 inch square. So when we're cutting out our pieces, we measure that to make sure that we cut everything proportionally. And then we have our table here, so our waist seam allowance, our hem seam allowance, our side seam allowance, waist circumference, hem circumference, right side seam length, left side seam length, negative ease, etc., etc. Let's say we wanted to do something crazy. Nothing is crazy in the world of pattern drafting. Okay, I'm thinking if we wanted to do something where, and I'll have to do a video on this. So very typical lyrical costume. Okay. Let's say we wanted to do something kind of like this very classic skirt in a lyrical costume. This is not quite sewn together the way that I'm imagining, but what we can do is for these gathers, for example, we can double our side seam, our right side seam length, double it from our left side seam length. So let's say we go 60. Actually, I've never tried this before, so it's gonna look interesting. So what we would do is we would gather this seam, and then our left seam is going to be our center front of our skirt. So if we wanted to do some gathers and have that lyrical type look, that's at 100% flare too. So I will have to do a separate video on that. But yes. Also, if we wanted to do, trying to think of different scenarios. If we did want to do a full asymmetrical look, for example, and just add the seam allowance in after the fact and just double our waist and our hip. So this is, let's say I'm 140, and this is around 200. We're gonna do, let's keep this at 60 and this at 30 and see what we can come up with. So you wouldn't cut in the fold, we'd cut 2 pieces, and then we would add seam allowance here, and then this would be your side seam, and this would be your side seam. So you have that asymmetrical look. Okay, that's what you can do. Just some additional pattern hacking tips at the end. But yes, this is the A-line skirt. If you set the measurements normal as intended, the skirt will flow from the waist down to your hip with flare, and you have that A-line look versus a full circle skirt. All right, so if you want to try it out, link down in the description.